In 1952, a German couple welcomed their beautiful baby girl into the world, dreaming of the wonderful life that lay ahead of her. 24 years later, that same girl would be dead, her body ravaged by demons, her soul offered up to save others. Welcome to the In-Between. I'm Carol Ann, and today we're diving into one of the most well-documented cases of demonic possession in modern history, the haunting story of Anneliese Michel. Most parents on the face of the earth have the same dream, that their kids will grow up to be happy and healthy and go on to live a better life than they did. That's why some parents work themselves to death trying to make their children's lives a little bit better. Anna and Josef Michel were no different. Germany in the 1950s was almost half Catholic, including the families of Anna and Josef. Anna and Josef both came from devout families, including Josef's 3 aunts who were nuns. His mom wanted him to become a priest, but his Latin was atrocious, kind of a problem for a priest at the time when masses were spoken in Latin. So she eventually settled for him getting married and taking over his new wife's family sawmill business in Klingenberg, a small village just a few miles southeast of Frankfurt. Life starts hard for Anna when she has a little fling with an employee at the sawmill and gets pregnant out of wedlock with her first daughter, Martha, born in 1948. That relationship doesn't work out, but another man, Josef, loves her and marries her in 1950, despite the stigma Anna carries with her, symbolized for all to see by being made to wear a black veil on her wedding day. But life goes on. Must be a pretty good one. They welcomed their first daughter together, Anneliese, on September 21st, 1952. And after her comes 3 more girls, Gertrude Maria, Barbara, and Roswitha. Not everything is a bed of roses. Anna's first daughter, Martha, dies of kidney failure at age 8. The youngest 3 girls are all great, but Anneliese has a harder time. By the time she's 5, she's already gone through mumps, measles, and scarlet fever. All the sick time meant that she had to be held back a year in school. But by the time her first communion rolls around, usually around age 7 or 8, she's a little frail looking, but catching up to friends nicely. Anneliese turns out to be a great student who loves music and decides she wants to become a teacher. The Michel family thrives together as they attend Mass at least once, if not twice, a week, and often pray the rosary together. They even honored the 13th day of every month in remembrance of Our Lady of Fatima. If you're curious about Our Lady of Fatima and the Third Secret, there's a link in the description to our episode specifically about that event, including the miracle of the sun. But anyway, you get the idea. A very devout family. But everyone seems to be doing well. That is, until right around Anneliese's 16th birthday. She's hanging out with her friend, Marie-Louise, when she suddenly loses consciousness. Now, whether that really means she just fainted or not, I don't know. But either way, she blinks out for a second. She recovers right away, so after a nervous laugh from both girls, they forget about it. Anneliese just thinks, I just need some sleep. But later that night, she wakes up and can't move. It feels like some outside force is pushing her down, pressing on her stomach. Now, whether from the pressure, the lack of muscle control, or just plain fear, I don't know, but she feels herself wet the bed. She has a hard time breathing, and she can't move her tongue. She can't even make any noise to wake up her sister, who's sleeping right next to her. In the morning, she's way too tired to go to school, and she tells her mom what happened, but they just think she needs to relax. And that seems to be just the ticket. Until almost a year later, on August 24th, 1969, when the same thing happens. She blacks out during the day and then wakes up unable to move during the night. This time, her mom takes her to the doctor the same day. Now, this is the start of a pretty hefty timeline, but I will do my best to move through it quickly but coherently. They go see the family doctor, Dr. Vogt, who immediately sends them to the neurologist, Dr. Luthi, in nearby Aschaffenburg. Dr. Luthi runs a bunch of tests, but doesn't find anything wrong, either neurologically or psychologically. But to be sure, he schedules Anneliese for an electroencephalogram, or EEG, 3 days later. An EEG is just a test to check out the electrical activity in your brain, make sure that all the waves are waving the way that they should. The EEG comes back normal, but Dr. Luthi says his opinion is that she's epileptic. But because these seizures she's having are far apart, he doesn't prescribe any drugs. He just sends her home. After that, Anneliese is plagued by a sore throat, long enough that she has her tonsils removed. And then she gets pleurisy, which is inflammation of the membrane that separates your lungs from your rib cage, and she gets pneumonia. By this time, it's like the following February. She's been stuck in bed, not going to school, but not getting any better. So Anneliese's parents send her to a hospital in Aschaffenburg that by the end of February sends her to another hospital in Middelburg that specializes in lung issues. When she gets there, she gets the news that she also has heart and circulatory problems. Nice! While she's there, she stays devout and tries to stay positive, but that's not easy. She still wants to become a teacher, which is hard when you're stuck in the hospital. But she also has kind of an epiphany. She decides that whatever is going on with her is God's will, and that if that prevents her from becoming a teacher, then she will instead become a catechist, someone who teaches the principles of Christianity, or in her case, Catholicism. But she's still going to do her best to become a teacher. On June 3rd, while Anneliese is still in the hospital in Middelburg, she has another episode. Same stiff limbs, can't breathe, wets the bed. So 2 weeks later, June 16th, she goes to Kempten to see another neurologist, Dr. Haller. Another EEG, same results. Normal. But Dr. Haller gives her a prescription for an anticonvulsant. 6 weeks later, another EEG that again comes out normal. And on August 29th, 1970, she finally gets to go home. That is 6 months that she's been away from home in a hospital. Everybody's happy she's finally back at home. But Anneliese's little sister, Roswitha, can tell something's not right. What Anneliese hasn't told anyone yet is that while she was in the hospital, she started to see faces. She can never quite describe these faces except to call them Fratzen, German for hideous or grotesque faces. And she starts to smell these totally repulsive odors like burning feces. But apparently, she's the only one who can smell them. But she has to keep moving forward, right? She has to start school again. With all of her illnesses, she's lost 2 years of school when she goes back to begin the 11th grade. So naturally, she's pretty shy and quiet and seemingly only interested in religion. Her feelings of isolation and still not being 100% well start reflecting in her grades. Per Middelburg Hospital instructions, Anna takes Anneliese to a lung specialist, Dr. Reichelt. Dr. Reichelt says your lungs are fine, but you still have a circulation problem. I'm sending you to Dr. Packhauser. Anneliese and her mother are like, no more doctors. So Dr. Packhauser writes to Dr. Vogt, remember the family doctor, and says, I think she needs a neurologist. Dr. Vogt says, nah, and instead, he also prescribes an anticonvulsant. However, there's no real evidence that she took those drugs for long, as she was still suffering from times when she would just kind of check out and her body would get stiff. But she struggles on with her life for another year until June of 1972, when she has another one of the larger attacks. The following September is another normal EEG, but her neurologist put Anneliese on Zentropil or Dilantin, which is another anticonvulsant. But by October, the instances of mental checkouts and body stiffness actually start to increase. Anneliese has checkups on January 18th, March 27th, and June 4th and June 6th to monitor for side effects. EEG is again normal with no more large seizure-like episodes. Except she still sees those demonic faces, the Fratzen, smells the horrible smells, and now hears voices telling her she's damned to hell. On top of all of that, Anneliese starts hearing knocking noises in her room at night. Her parents think she's imagining it, but this time her sisters can hear it too. Another trip to Dr. Vogt confirms that Anneliese's ears are fine. Her dad, Josef, just tells the family to calm down. This is all a part of the epilepsy. He thinks this is totally a medical issue. And I think Anna believed that too, except she couldn't get a particular memory out of her head. The memory of seeing Anneliese standing in front of the family statue of the Blessed Virgin Mary with a mask of hate and contempt on her face and eyes that are totally jet black. Oh, and she comes down with the German measles. So that means a trip to the new family doctor, Dr. Keller. Amazingly enough, between doctor visits, the measles, the missed school, she still manages to pass all of her tests at the end of the year and graduates. What nobody knows is at this point, which she hasn't told anyone, is that the Fratzen faces, the smells, the voices, the knocking, it's all taking its toll on her. She feels like she's trapped in a hole with no way out. She doesn't care about anything, feels disconnected from everything. She knows that she should be feeling something, but she feels nothing. Sadly, things only get worse from here. One of Anneliese's favorite places is a pilgrimage site called San Damiano, which is this little shrine in northern Italy, not too far from the Shroud of Turin. Check out our Shroud of Turin video, link in the description, where the Blessed Virgin Mary is said to have appeared to a woman named Rosa Quattrini, affectionately known as Mama Rosa. Mama Rosa is very ill with peritonitis, which is when one of your organs is leaking into the rest of your body. The doctors can't do anything else for her, so she is sent home to die under the care of her Aunt Adele. One afternoon, a stranger in a sky blue scarf comes to the door to ask for 500 lira to buy 3 candles for the Church of Santa Maria del Grazie in San Giovanni Rotondo, where Padre Pio is. Padre Pio is a Franciscan friar and priest who bears the mark of the stigmata, wounds in his hands and his feet like the ones of Jesus Christ. So you can imagine he has lots of visitors and pilgrims stopping by to see him. And this guy must be like the talk of Italy. I mean, here's Rosa in this little town of San Damiano, and Padre Pio is almost 400 miles to the south, yet Rosa knows all about him and is praying to him for help. Aunt Adele tells the stranger, "We don't have the money. We only have like 1,000 lira to our name, and we had to borrow that. And I'm just here taking care of my niece Rosa." The stranger asks to see Rosa and enters the house. She asks Rosa, "Do you have faith in Padre Pio?" Rosa says, "Yes, I do. I've been praying to him for his help, but I'm not healed yet." The stranger says, "If you have faith in Padre Pio, he will heal you. Now get up." She takes Rosa by the hands. Rosa feels a jolt of energy, stands up, and can feel she is healed. The stranger leaves, and Aunt Adele goes back inside to find Rosa doing the dishes. On October 16th, 1964, she is visited by the Virgin Mary herself. In fact, she's visited a number of times and is given instructions to dig a well. The well is dug, The water flows, and it is said that many people have either been healed or have been converted by either drinking the water or just being at the little garden that surrounds the well. Now, that was a very stripped down version of that story, but if you want more information, there is a link in the description to a website that talks all about it. So, San Damiano is this great place of healing, and Anneliese's father, Joseph, had been there before with their neighbor, Thea Hine, who seems to organize these trips for people pretty regularly. So Joseph says, I think we need to go. So they get on a bus and they head to Italy. Once they get there, Anneliese can't bring herself to go into the shrine. She goes around the back, but she can't get past the garden. She says the ground feels like fire under her feet. She can't even look at anything remotely holy. Thea sees Anneliese as having issues and brings the holy water to her, but Anneliese can't bring herself to drink it. She says it smells bad. Her dad buys her a necklace with a medal on it. She puts it on, but then takes it right back off again, saying that it makes her feel like she can't breathe. She sees that Thea has a medal on too, hanging under her dress. Anneliese grabs the front of Thea's dress and pulls to get it off. When they all get on the bus to go back home, she pushes Thea, knocking her down and breaking her rosary. The whole 300-mile plus trip home, Anneliese is mocking Thea, swearing at her in this deep, guttural voice and emitting a stench that everyone on the bus can smell. And amazingly enough, after that trip, Anneliese and Thea become friends. Wow! Thea prays for Anneliese, and Anneliese says she can always feel when Thea is praying for her. Life moves on, and Anneliese gets ready to go to college. She goes to see Dr. Luthi, the neurologist, again on September 3rd, 1973. She tells Dr. Luthi about seeing the faces. Anneliese's mom, Anna, would later say that Dr. Luthi suggests they find a priest. Of course, Dr. Luthi says, I never said that. But whatever the truth is, they never went back to see Dr. Luthi. And here is when the Michels start looking for spiritual help, because obviously the medical help isn't working. They go to see Father Habinger, whose associate priest, Father Roth, sits in on the meeting where the Michels tell them, we think our daughter might be possessed. Father Habinger sees nothing but a perfectly normal young woman in front of him. So he says, take her to a doctor. Meanwhile, Thea decides to cut right to the chase and contacts one Father Roderick, who seems to be the area expert on demonic possession with several books on the topic under his belt. Father Roderick says, well, yeah, she might be possessed, but I am way too old for this. I suggest you go see Father Herman. Father Herman would meet with Anneliese about 10 times between the fall of 1973 and the summer of 1975. He also finds her to be a nice young lady, and he too says, go see a doctor. Her parents tell Father Herman about her aversion to holy objects and the frequent stenches. But Father Herman prayed the rosary with Anneliese, and she never freaked out. Now, remember the first two priests that they saw, Father Habinger and Father Roth? Well, Father Roth has a friend named Father Ernst Alt. Father Alt is a pretty interesting dude, since not only is he a priest, but he's also kind of a medium. Father Roth tells Father Alt about Anneliese, and Father Alt agrees to help. He and Anneliese have a very lovely meeting where Father Alt finds her charming, intelligent, and emotionally mature. Then the irises of her eyes go black. Not the whole thing, but no color whatsoever. Anneliese tells Father Alt, something is attacking me right now. He gives her a blessing, and everything goes back to normal. Anneliese then heads off to college in Würzburg, not too far away. She's pretty homesick, but she knows a few people there, and Father Alt manages to visit her every couple of weeks. She tells him she's taking her medication, but she still sees the Fratzen demon faces. In November, Anneliese meets Peter. Love at first sight. And even her friends say she was acting like a smitten kitten. But after just 2 weeks, she tells Peter, I can't see you anymore. You are biting off way more than you can chew here. You have no idea what my life is like. Peter, God bless this man, says you're going to have to do better than that to get rid of me. But there's got to be a doctor who can help. So Anneliese goes to see Dr. Leonard. Dr. Leonard thinks she has epilepsy, frosted in a thick, neurotic resentment toward her strict parents. So he refers her to Dr. Schleip, academic director of the University Neurological Clinic. Dr. Schleip gives her another EEG, which shows some irregular brainwave patterns in the left temporal area of her brain. Since the Dilantin she's been taking doesn't seem to really be doing the job, he switches her to Tegretol. And life continues. Peter stands by her side through all of her unpredictable mood swings and bouts of depression. By the spring of 1974, Anneliese is getting headaches, maybe from the Tegretol, so she goes back to Dr. Leonard and Dr. Schleip. Her EEG looks better, but they keep her on the Tegretol. Father Alt becomes Anneliese's spiritual director, and she visits him anytime things get too much for her to bear. And he still doesn't know what to think. He's working hard to try to come up with a natural explanation, but can't. By the fall of 1974, things are getting progressively worse for Anneliese. She feels like God has totally abandoned her. So Father Alt reaches out to Bishop Stangl for permission to perform an exorcism. A priest can't just have at it and do their own exorcism. They have to have permission from a bishop. The bishop says, nope, just keep doing what you're doing. At school, Anneliese dives harder into her religion and befriends a group of people who, like her, do not appreciate the modernization that the Catholic Church is going through as a result of Vatican II. They pray the rosary every night, have holy pictures on their walls, and a holy water font at the door. January of 1975 is another appointment with Dr. Schleip and another EEG. Nothing has changed, so keep taking the Tegretol. Spring of 1975, on the suggestion of Father Alt, Anneliese goes for a checkup with the family doctor, Dr. Keller. Everything looks great, but he sends her back to Dr. Schleip. In June, another EEG that looked a little better, but he says, keep taking the Tegretol, but we should be able to have you off of it in about 6 months. Great! But things at college are going downhill pretty fast. Her friends say that Anneliese, during a normal conversation, would tell them to stop praying it's hurting her, when no one was praying out loud. Not only is she not eating well, but she took the pictures of Jesus off the wall, and she stopped going to Mass. Her friend, Anna Lippert, recalls an episode when she, Anneliese, and Peter were just hanging out when, mid-sentence, Anneliese's face contorts into her own Fratzen face, and her whole body goes stiff. It takes like a half an hour before she relaxes. Peter just tells Anna, nothing to worry about, she's just possessed. To which Anna pretty much says, I can see that. At the end of June, she goes to visit Father Alt with Peter and her sister Roswitha. And she tells him, I'm getting totally out of control. She says she wants Peter and her sisters around, but then would just start throwing things at them. But she's still taking her meds. They meet again the following week, with Anneliese having tears streaming down her face. They start to pray the rosary together, but Anneliese can't even finish. Father Alt starts to recite some sort of exorcism prayer in his head, and Anneliese loses her mind and rips the rosary to pieces. Peter comes to pick her up, and she tells him in a deep, guttural tone to leave. Now, Father Alt knows she is possessed. He calls her parents and suggests it's time for them to come and take her home. Anna and Joseph take Anneliese to see Dr. Schleip again, but other than, I think she's got epilepsy, there's not much help. Back at home, things are better and worse. She's starting to eat a little more, but now her legs are completely stiff. She has to kind of drag herself around using tables and chairs to lean on. She can't sleep. She can't pray. And now that she's back home in Klingenberg, Father Alt is a lot further away and not able to see her as often. Thea Hein suggests they get Father Roth to pay a visit. Father Roth talks to Joseph and gets it all set up without either one of them talking to Anneliese. But she then tells her dad, Roth, that dog, he is also going to come. How did she know that? So Father Roth comes over and is immediately hit with the awful burning poo smell in the living room. Joseph tells him, yup, Anneliese was just in here. As Father Roth is in the kitchen, Anneliese comes running up at him like she's going to attack him and stops about 3 feet away, standing there just stiff. And then she does it again, but this time starts screaming at him to get out. She tears up a rosary and throws the pieces on the floor. Anna and Joseph both tell Father Roth about her crazy, out-of-control behavior and ask him to bless her. As Father Roth takes a crucifix out of his pocket, Anneliese goes nuts and tries to throw a 5-liter bottle of San Damiano water at him. Thankfully, it only fell on the floor next to her. So now Anneliese is stuck at home because her board legs don't work and she's having trouble speaking. Anna talks to Peter and says, can you take her for a drive or something? Just get her out of the house for a while. So he takes her out for a drive and they stop for a walk. It's slow going, but Peter is patient. Anneliese suddenly drops to her knees in a trance-like state for like 10 minutes. When she gets back up, she can walk again. They drive back to her house full of joy and excitement to tell her parents. They ask her, what happened? And Anneliese tells them she had a visit from Mother Mary. 2 months later, she has another visit from Mary, but this time Mary has a message and a question for her. It is a great suffering for my heart that so many souls are lost. It is necessary to do penance for priests, for the youth, and for your country. Would you like to do penance for these souls so that not so many are lost? She tells Anneliese that she has 3 days to decide. Anneliese tells her parents, who are like, whoa, 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 let's slow this roll. We have no idea what that means. Maybe this isn't a good idea. To which, after 3 days of standing and kneeling in front of a crucifix, Anneliese responds, I can, Mom. If I don't, souls may be lost. Everything is good for a couple of weeks, but Anneliese tells Peter things are about to get rough. Peter takes her back to college in Würzburg to start her fall semester. But as soon as they get there and get to her room, Anneliese stands in front of the crucifix on the wall, goes into a trance, goes completely stiff, gets a distorted, frotzen look on her face, and starts growling at the crucifix. Peter says, okay, maybe this isn't a good idea, turns them both around and takes her right back home. Meanwhile, Father Roth and Father Alt get together to chat, and Father Roth tells Father Alt what happened when he went to visit. They both agree she has to be possessed. Now, in the Catholic Church, there are certain criteria that have to be met in order to consider the idea that someone is possessed. Things like knowing things they shouldn't know, aversion to sacred objects, and speaking in unknown languages. Both priests agree, yup, we're there. Bishop Stengel says, okay, you have my permission to start with these small exorcism prayers. Small exorcisms or minor exorcisms are not meant to confront the suspected demon, but to spiritually fortify or protect the person possessed. So they did that. Not a whole lot happened other than Anneliese's whimpering, saying that she feels like she's burning, and her trying to knock the prayer book out of Father's hand. However, there is a whole lot happening at Anneliese's house. She is on a 22-hour-a-day rant. She runs screaming through the house. She falls to her knees, gets up, and falls again so many times that she gets sores on her knees and damages the ligaments around her knees. Sometimes her whole body goes stiff for days. Sometimes it's just her neck that goes stiff and she can't eat. On those occasions, she would drop to the floor and eat spiders and flies. She urinates on the kitchen floor. She tries to kick, punch, or bite everyone. She tears holy pictures off the walls, destroys rosaries, destroys crucifixes. Peter's shirts are all torn with missing sleeves from her attacks. Her teeth are chipped from biting holes in the walls. At one point, she's under the kitchen table barking like a dog, refusing to come out. No one can get her to move. Joseph has a light bulb moment and calls Thea Hein. Thea comes over and tells her 3 times, in the name of the Blessed Trinity, come out and sit down, which, after the 3rd time, she does. It's around this same time that Anna notices the open wounds on her daughter's hands and feet. Anneliese is marked with the stigmata wounds of Christ. Peter, Joseph, Anna, and Roswitha now have to take 2-hour shifts around the clock to guard Anneliese from hurting herself or anyone else. They try to get a hold of Father Alt, but he's on vacation, so instead they go straight to Father Roderick, the exorcism expert. He says, "All right, I think it's time that I take a look at what is going on here myself." When he gets there, Anneliese is in one of her trances, and he asks her, "What is your name?" To which she replies in a gruff, deep tone, "Judas." And as he's leaving, she slaps him. His diagnosis? Yup, she's possessed. It is decided that Father Alt and another priest named Father Renz would be the ones to perform the actual rite of exorcism. They send a letter to Bishop Stengel again, and this time they include with their letter Father Roderick's formal opinion that this is indeed a case of possession. And the bishop finally says, "Fine, go for it." The first session of what would become a series of 67 sessions began in her very own home at 4 p.m. on September 24th, 1975, 3 days after Anneliese's 23rd birthday. And that is important to note. Anneliese is a fully grown woman at this point, legally able to make her own decisions. And she'd already made everyone around her swear that they would not call any more doctors. She was done with doctors. Nothing that they had done so far had helped. And if they were called, it was very likely they would commit her to a psych ward where she would have no one around her to help her fend off these spiritual attacks. Throughout the course of these 67 sessions, it is revealed that Anneliese is possessed by at least 6 demons. At least that's how many actually fessed up to being there. Those 6 demons are Lucifer, Judas, Hitler, Cain, Nero, a notorious persecutor of Christians in the 1st century, and a guy by the name of Fleischmann. Don't be surprised that you have no idea who Fleischmann is. Neither did anybody else except Father Alt. Turns out that the parish he serves over in Edelben, just on the other side of Würzburg from Klingenberg, needed some repairs when he got there. While going through the church records to figure out who he needed to talk to get this stuff done, he goes down a rabbit hole in the church archives that go all the way back to the church's founding in 1288. Fascinated by all of this history of his church, he started reading about some of the prior priests who had served there. As he's gliding through records, his eye catches on this priest named Valentin Fleischmann, who served the Edelman parish from 1572 to 1575. This guy is a total piece of work. He is a total womanizing drunk who had children out of wedlock. A daughter named Martha is rumored to have killed somebody in the church rectory, as well as beating a woman to within an inch of her life. In 1575, he is defrocked and excommunicated from the church. Of course, Father Alt never told anybody in Anneliese's circle about any of this. Why would he? This was just an interesting afternoon at the archives. One thing had nothing to do with the other. So the addition of Pastor Fleischmann in the Gang of Six is very interesting. Probably more of a message to Father Alt than anything else. After the session started, Thea Hine had the brilliant idea of tape recording the sessions. Father Rentz thinks this is an awesome idea. They already missed the first few sessions, but this will be way better than him trying to remember what happened to take notes later. There are now at least 40 session tapes, and listening to these things will make the strongest backbones start to wilt. So I'm going to play just a little bit of one of these sessions. They're in German, but the subtitles will be on the screen. And just to let you know, from the transcripts of these sessions that I read, a lot of these sessions are long and rambling and don't really make a whole lot of sense. But I just want to play a snip or two so you can hear the voice of the demons.
Ja, warum? Weil ich liebe Tauben. Nein, ich sag's nicht. Ich hab diese Rebelle. Weil eine starke eine starke Waffe ist. Ja. Gegen Satan. Ja. Ja, gegen uns. Ich muss es dir sagen. Der Rosenreich ist eine gewaltige Macht, die den Satan und alle Dämonen. Glaub nicht. Halt es dir nur volles Weibetäuschen. Zum Glück. Ja.
Does that not make your hair stand on end? And then there's this one of just her screaming. Hearing this for the first time literally gave me chills. That is terrifying. I don't know why you would, but if you would like to hear more, there are videos out there that are about an hour and a half long for your listening pleasure. Father Rentz usually read from his prayer book in Latin, but we already know that Anneliese was a whiz at Latin. However, he would also pose questions to her in Dutch and Chinese, which she would answer correctly in German. So this is how life goes on in the Michel household from September to the following spring of 1976, with Anneliese's condition getting worse as time ticks by and the demons refusing to leave. At one point, they say they're going to leave in October. Of course, October comes and goes with no relief. Apparently, demons lie. Huh. Although after a while, when commanded to leave, they start saying they can't, that God won't let them. Anneliese eats when the demons will let her, but those days are fewer and farther between as time goes on. One interesting note is that Lucifer may have actually given us a clue as to why this is happening to Anneliese in the first place. Lucifer says the other one of the village where the curse took place was an envious woman, that woman from your mother's village. Hearing that, Anna thinks she knows what happened. We know that Anna had a child, Martha, out of wedlock in 1948. Martha's father was a guy who worked at Anna's father's sawmill. When Anna and Martha's father parted ways, Anna married Joseph, and Martha's father married another woman. The speculation is that the other woman was envious of Anna and Joseph, who were doing quite well for themselves financially, when she and her husband were really struggling, and she cursed Anneliese before she was even born. Peter says Anna and Joseph tried to track down the woman after the fact, but no luck. Now, Anneliese is going back and forth between home and college, trying to finish up her triple major of music, education, and theology. By the time the school year is over, she is so weak and suffering so many attacks that she has to dictate her senior thesis paper to Peter and her sisters to get it done. But amazingly enough, she gets it done. By now, Anna has layered Annaliese's bedroom floor with as many pillows and quilts as she can get. Some invisible force seems to throw Anneliese to the ground over and over again every day, bruising her head and her face. And sometimes, when trying to move Anneliese, who's getting thinner and thinner by the day, she feels like she weighs 1,000 pounds, and it takes several men to lift her. In April, Anneliese tells Father Alt that May and June are going to be bad, but July will bring a resolution. So all eyes are on July. If they can just make it to July, this will all be over. And it better be. Her body just can't take much more of this. Her hands and feet are sometimes tied to keep her from hurting herself. Father Alt has a friend, Dr. Richard Roth, who's a medical doctor that he's been talking to about the case. He played some of the tapes for Dr. Roth, which apparently moved Dr. Roth to start praying again. Sometime that spring, Father Alt invited Dr. Roth to come and witness one of the exorcism sessions. With Annaliese's condition deteriorating, Father Alt was glad to have a doctor in the house just in case. On this particular day, Anneliese is super agitated, and Father Alt suggests to Dr. Roth that maybe he could give her something to calm her down, at which point Dr. Roth puts some ampules of something and a few syringes in his pocket before entering the house. When they get in the house, Dr. Roth sees the stigmata wounds on Annaliese's hands and feet and says, "My God, she has the stigmata," and pretty much tells everyone there's nothing any doctor can do for her. There is no injection against the devil. And despite the fact that her knees are still broken and battered, she is still falling to her knees approximately 600 times a day. However, in the midst of all of this chaos, during the times Anneliese was lucid and free, she never wavered in her faith or her decision to suffer for the souls of others. On June 27th, Anneliese is running a fever of about 104. And Father Alt says, "Call a doctor." But Anneliese says no. She doesn't eat or drink anything the next day, despite falling to her knees and standing up and falling to her knees again countless times throughout the day. Her last exorcism session is on June 30th, 1976, with her mom and dad, Peter, Roswitha, and Barbara there with her. And again, she has a temp of 104. She asks Father Rentz for absolution, which he immediately gives to her. After Father Rentz and Peter leave that evening, and Anneliese is in bed at just past midnight, she asks her mother to stay with her, saying, "Mama, please stay with me. I'm afraid." Joseph checks on his daughter at 7 a.m. before he leaves for work, and it looks like she's sleeping peacefully for the first time in forever. But by 8 a.m., Anna calls him at work to tell him that Anneliese has died. When Anneliese kept telling everyone that on July 1st she would be free, this was not the outcome anyone had imagined, including Anneliese. She and Peter were talking about getting married in the fall. Anna calls Father Alt, who calls Dr. Roth and says, please go over to the house and make sure that she's not just in a deep trance or something. Father Roth goes over to the house and confirms that Anneliese is indeed dead. Unfortunately, he didn't bring any of the necessary paperwork for a death certificate with him. If he had, he would have issued a death certificate right then and there, and no one would have ever known about this case. But he didn't. So they had to call the family doctor, Dr. Keller, to come over. He takes one look at Anneliese's bruised and battered body and says, there is no way I am attesting to this being death by natural causes. She needs an autopsy. The autopsy finds that Anneliese has died of starvation and dehydration, and that if medical interventions had been allowed as late as just 1 week before her death, she might not have died. When word gets out that she's died and that she weighs only 68 pounds, there is an uproar. Fathers Alt and Renz, as well as Josef and Anna, are brought up on charges of negligent homicide. A few months later, word gets to the family that a Carmelite nun says she's received messages about Anneliese and that the family should have her exhumed to see if her body is corrupted. If it's not, she would most likely be on the way to beatification, which is like the first step toward sainthood. The body is exhumed and taken to a mortuary to be opened. The police say, nope, she looks just like a body would after being dead this long. Funny though, after being told they would be allowed to see their daughter, Anna and Josef, as well as Father Renz, are all denied access to see Anneliese's body. Interesting. Their trial starts at the end of March 1977, with the question being, could Anneliese have been saved if she had gotten medical attention? The defense's argument is, of course, you can't inject against the devil, and the fact that Anneliese had a constitutional right to practice her religion the way she saw fit and not seek medical attention, and that the diagnosis of Anneliese having epilepsy at all is highly sketchy, considering only 2 out of 7 EEGs show any abnormality, with the other 2 being only small anomalies. And the prosecution's theory is that the epilepsy medicine stopped the seizures, so her brain found another outlet and caused this psychosis, which was then exaggerated by the exorcism sessions. The defense's own psychiatric experts who examined both the fathers said that they held primitive religious views and leaned toward magico-mystical ideas. The trial is over by the end of April, and all 4 defendants are found guilty and sentenced to 6 months in jail and 3 years probation, with the jail time suspended. So is this a case of the devil made her do it, or was Anneliese's own brain the culprit? Obviously, a lot of her symptoms could be attributed to epilepsy. The frowns faces and the terrible smells could easily be motor function seizures. And from what I can tell, neither of the 2 meds that she took would control those types of seizures. But what about what everyone else was smelling? They weren't all having motor function seizures. And she saw a total of 8 different doctors. So it's not like they weren't trying to find a medical solution. In fact, in the beginning and most of the way through, everyone around her believed this was a medical issue. They went down the traditional medical path until there was nowhere left to go. On the other hand, Anneliese's demons seem to conveniently reflect the same things she was worried about, namely modernization of the church after Vatican II reforms in the early 60s. And oddly, sometimes even give instructions on what the faithful should do to get to heaven. Seems like kind of unlikely conversation for a demon who's supposed to want your soul, not try to save it. But on the other hand, again, the thought here is that the epilepsy was the root of the problem, slathered over in a mighty heaping of psychosis that was only reinforced by the exorcism sessions. However, some of her doctors had their own ideas of what was going on in Anneliese's head, but no one sent her to a psychiatrist for a full psychiatric examination. So her having a psychotic breakdown is only a guess, not anyone's professional opinion. Anneliese's mother, Anna, was interviewed in 2005, where she made it clear that she still believed they did the right thing, stating, "I know that we did the right thing because I saw the sign of Christ in her hands. She died to save lost souls, to atone for their sins." She is also quoted as saying, "The worst of the matter is not that so much has been written about this case, but that in spite of it all, no one believes in the devil." Dr. M. Kamal Ermak, who wrote a paper called Schizophrenia or Possession, puts forth the idea that maybe it's not that all cases of demonic possession are psychosis in disguise. Maybe all cases of psychosis are demonic possession in disguise. There are lots of goodies waiting for you in the description today, including an English transcript of at least part of the exorcism sessions and a link to our Amazon store where you can go buy the book I used as the main source for this episode. This one is pretty crazy, and there are many more layers of detail to dive into if you want to know more about how this whole unbelievable affair went down. No matter what side of the fence you're on, it's tragic all the way around. I'm sure many of you have guessed by now that this is the real-life inspiration for the movie The Exorcism of Emily Rose, which I have seen, I enjoyed immensely, and yes, it scared the crap out of me. And for those of you who are thinking, wow, Peter is like the ultimate in loyal boyfriends, how do I get in touch with that guy? I hate to tell you, he did eventually get married and have 6 children. For those of you who want to stay in this intersection of the religiously paranormal, click right here. Please, sir, could you watch some more? Be careful out there, and I will see you here again on the In-Between.